Hi, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com here in my weekly series talking to modern fathers and getting a lay of the land and hopefully helping a few younger and maybe older dads out along the way. And today I'm really excited to talk to Gavin Bellour because we both share some history in advertising, but we were going to talk about humor. So welcome, Gavin.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it was I would loved looking at your website, gavinbellour.com, and we'll put that in the show notes because you have a lot of ads, and it's been a while in my career where I've looked at a whole bunch of different ads and appreciated all that goes into it. You got some great celebrity ads with Jason Biggs and Martha Stewart, and Norm Macdonald is on there
Yeah.
and brought back a lot of memories of the creative process. How long you've been doing advertising and this kind of work?
I mean, I kind of fell into it on this side of things over 15 years ago. I found a roundabout way there. I was in bands and I was actually on camera as talent initially when I started. So I've kind of really never had a real quote unquote jobby job except for a couple ones. And I kind of always, when I look back at it, I never realized this going forward. But looking back, like all I've ever really done, to make a living was tell stories one way or another and make dumb things that I think are funny or I like or whatever. So the real answer is probably forever, ever since I've been around. But officially, as as a paid employee of creating this kind of stuff, probably about 15 years.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting that it kind of dovetails with how long you've been a dad too. So
Yeah.
you were taking on a lot of this. I mean, the creative process is both very, very, very satisfying, but also very stressful and a lot of work. How did that work out when you first started having your first first boy child back?
Yeah, yeah, I've got three boys and a girl.
Yep,
And we have four total.
yep.
Which it's always kind of funny these days. I say that, and people are just the reactions they get are kind of
Yeah,
hilarious. And
right, right,
I get it because I probably would have said the same thing.
right. Yeah. Why didn't you go
Um,
for 12? I mean,
just keep going. Oh, I can talk to my wife. She kind of never mind. But yeah, they did dovetail, and it was, I was having a success more on camera as an artist, and then and in bands, and then my wife lived in New York, or my then girlfriend, and I was in LA. And when I went to New York, I had some success, but there were some industry things that changed right then. And so initially, the way I got started into directing and writing, although I'd done aspects of it, was just kind of like, man, I got to pay the rent. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I knew we wanted to get married, and New York's more expensive, and some things that I'd done. I don't know if anybody knows how acting and those residuals work, and things that I had done that were paying ceased suddenly, and a bunch of them all at the same time. So
Mm,
it created some financial pinch, which so this was something I was like, oh, initially just something I could do that's a little more reliable, a little more regular, so to speak, compared to what I was doing, and but very much with a mind to having kids. So as our first came along, there was a stress there, and my mom reminded me of a thing. What was it? I'm probably slaughtering it, but there's an old Polish, and I don't know why she gave me a Polish thing because she's not Polish at all. But there's apparently a Polish saying that babies come with bread under the arm or something along those lines. So the idea being that, like, when it's kind of like your necessity level raises. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
right.
you're afraid of where's the money going to come, where's the expertise going to come from, how am I going to know how to do this, and like when the babies come, when the kids come, you can be ready for it, and the money will come, and the thing because you're kind of just like gradually expanding as a
Yeah.
person a little bit, and you'll figure it out. Is kind of the essential, but sometimes there's a little bit of good luck there too, maybe. So look at that, dropping things left and right. Yeah, but basically the short answer is that they did dovetail and they were weirdly related. Again, probably more in retrospect than at the time, but yeah, it's kind of how it started. here we are.
Yeah. So, well, because I know I think I've always been a fairly interested in humor and having fun, but the kids definitely bring out a lot of humor if you look at the situations with a lot of humor. Because
For
even a
sure.
kid, pooping all over himself, there's a certain or peeing in your face when you change the diaper. There's a certain amount of humor there. It's
Oh yeah.
maybe not the most intellectual humor, but it can be really funny. Did you find that there were moments where you just rather than cry, you wanted to laugh?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, even now, like, when things just go completely
Yeah.
mayhem, maybe not half the time, because it can get, you can get a little agitated and things go on. But I think, when they get to that level, and sometimes even now, just my wife and I will look across the room and just like all you can do is laugh. It's like this is complete. Like step out from this really quickly, look back in. This is complete insanity. We were on a plane the other day, and we've got an entire row, six across, and like the 2-year-old is like hitting like the one thing he wants to hit is the stewardess button. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Just keeping
Yeah.
repeating. She's already mad at us because like, another one of our kids like won't sit down, and it's just like pure mayhem. And you're trying to keep all your manners in, and at the end of the day, it's just kind of funny. You know what I mean? But yes, I mean, there's so much potential for humor, and there's so many nuances to the humor. And then it's also fun to watch kids as they grow up kind of develop their own sense of humor as well as go through certain stages of humor, what's funny, what's not, what they find funny, how they learn how to tell a joke, the mechanism of what makes a joke funnier, at 5 versus at 7, and then 13 when they really, or 12, 11, 13 when they kind of start to like twist in a different way. It's just very interesting to mark their progress as people a little bit by kind of their sense of humor, and how you can make them laugh and how they generate laughter within the family is really fun, I find.
Yeah, well, that whole making them laugh part,
Oh
I
yeah.
just think that a family that's got just full of laughs, no matter how you're making the kids laugh, is always such a great thing. Do you think that should be like I do a lot of work with dads on developing family values, and I don't mean that in the
Mhm.
kind of the conservative sense. I mean that in the kind
Sure.
of the like you're developing like you want your family stands for honesty or integrity
Yeah.
or empathy or generosity or things like that. Do you think humor should be a family value like that? For you, is it like, is that a core value a family, an ideal happy family should have, or is it just one of those things that's nice to have?
Oh no, I mean I think it's funny because when you put it in frame when you frame it like that, it's funny because I am like I would be worried that if let's put it on a wall, let's call it humor. Humor is we've got hard work
Right,
and
right,
religion or whatever, whatever they are, and
right.
then humor, like it almost takes it, it's like let's have some quality time right now, Paul. You and I, let's have quality time. It kind of automatic like it puts such a thing on it that almost like takes the lightness out of it.
Uh,
But if you're gonna like chisel it in stone like Ten Commandments, however, I would say that from some kind of organic way, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that, I almost measure just my wife and my relationship by on a regular is can I make her laugh? If I can make
yeah. Oh,
my
yeah.
wife
Well,
laugh like once or twice a day, I'm good. You know what I mean? If I'm in
yeah.
trouble and did something stupid, even if it wasn't really my fault and really didn't do something stupid, but like I'm the dad, whatever, like if I can just make her laugh, I know I'm good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well,
And if I can, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, there's some of us that weren't that great looking and not that successful, but we were able to tell a joke. I mean, a lot of women think that that's one of the sexiest things that
For sure.
you can have as a guy.
For sure. But yeah, and I think having the kids watch us laugh, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think that's super important. So I like to think that we can create a lot of laughter, and I like to think sometimes, I mean, my wife is absolutely hilarious, and she's really funny at laughing at herself, which is a really
hmm
unique
Oh,
characteristic.
yeah.
Like I'm probably a little more self-serious than I need to be, but like one of the things that gets my wife is if you can like really make fun of her in the right way, she thinks it's if you call her on her stuff, she thinks it's the
Mm.
funniest thing ever. But if we can, to try to sort of get that out, to lighten things up, to joke around, and I think in some families it's the mom. For me, for us, it's definitely. I think everybody's really actually funny. Everybody has a good sense of humor in their
That's
own
great.
way. But yeah, I mean, I like to provide that where I can because it's sort of kind of what I do. But it's also just something I like to do. So hopefully that adds to it. And I would probably say I'd never thought of it that way, but yeah, I would say it's a definitely a value or certainly a characteristic of something that I think definitely contributes to a happy household because humor is just important. If you don't have humor, if you can laugh, then I think you're doing okay, you know?
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before we started about how this may be one of those things that's a little bit like roughhouse play, where dads kind of are more willing to indulge in this, and sometimes not sure gross generalization, but sometimes moms are a lot more serious, like we got to get to school, or we got to get dressed, or we got to be to church, or whatever, and the dad
Yeah.
is still willing to have a few more laughs along the way. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's true in all households.
yeah, probably not all, but I don't know. Like, it's funny. I remember when we talked about that, and I was thinking like, oh no, it's sort of even. I know tons, but now that I think about it, and maybe it's just because as men we kind of relate a little more to men in terms of humor and what is funny. But yeah, there's that old cliche, which I think is possibly true too. Is this, we can be a little more kid sometimes and a little bit less. But there are definitely things in our household where I'm a little bit more though, like, okay, no, they got to be this and we got to do that. And
Mm.
then, my wife and I have kind of a really funny fluid relationship where, we both work, we both have kind of crazy schedules, and we kind of have a pretty good breakdown between us of who holds what and, whose activities are taken care of by whom. But
Yeah.
it's a little bit amorphous from an outside perspective, I'm sure. But genuinely, when somebody is being the stringent sort of, like, the more the more strict in a particular area, the other one would kind of take on the humor role.
Mhm.
So, and whether that's true in
No,
other families, I don't know, but having that counterpoint is definitely something that occurs here.
that's a beautiful thought. Is I mean, when things are getting stressed in the household, that if both partners are the one are willing to be the one who steps up and like let's lighten this. It's the
Yeah.
whatever it is. Being late for something by 5 minutes. That's
Yeah.
not the end of the world. Is there a joke that lightens it without minimizing or being,
Yes.
you know,
That's the
patronizing to the
trick.
person who has the stress moment? I mean, it's understanding the stress and then lightening it too.
That is 100% the trick.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't
I
know, think
have,
we have the solution to that one.
yeah, I have stepped in that one a few too times when you make a joke and wrong. I think the other thing too is I have really found myself embracing the dad joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I always got it because my dad always had kind of funny jokes and dumb things. And I've always understood it as like a mechanism in commercials or, film or whatever. But then now I notice of it, it's weird. I find it's like it's a little bit like more like a comedian would look at a joke. I don't know if you've ever, probably in your travels as an advertising person or anybody out there listening who knows comedians, real comedians, like you mentioned Norm earlier, stuff like that. Like guys like that, they don't laugh at jokes. They kind of look at them and take them apart in their head. And the best compliment you can get from guys like that are like, huh, that's funny.
Interesting.
They'll just kind of, oh, yeah. It's a very intellectual thing. They can see how the setup is and the premise and where it turned and how it landed or what are you playing on? And you can see it in like almost like a math problem. And I find that dad jokes are very similar in that. You know what I mean? It's not that they're necessarily funny. It's that you found like the dumbest freaking pun that you could and somehow landed it in your delivery. And it's more the admiration now with me and my friends who do this. And now my oldest kind of gets it. Like the dumber the joke, the funnier it is and the bigger win you can have. And if you repeat them out of context, they never work. But in the moment, they
Right,
are
right.
funny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the
Well,
dad joke is really just a distillation of a mechanism of a joke, not necessarily funny. And almost the worse they are, if you can get a laugh out of it, then that's your expert there, I think.
yeah. Well, I think there's something really interesting about the dad joke because it isn't a rehearsed joke. It's not a knock knock joke that I read this afternoon and then I come
Oh
back and I'm
no.
like ready to perform it for you. But
Yeah.
it's that working up the synapses and just
Oh yeah.
like riffing off of each other. And
Mhm.
I think I always feel bad because I think that dad jokes get like a bad rap. Like somehow they're the worst form of humor. And yeah, everybody always says puns are the lowest form of humor. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, if your
Yeah.
brain can come up with that kind of stuff like in the fly
Oh
and
yeah.
it's I mean they're I guess they're dumb puns, but they're also puns that are a lot more nuanced.
I don't know. I was on a call the other day and somebody was asking me what my superpower is or whatever. There was for a project I'm working on, and they were kind of trying to figure out if I was the right fit. And I paused for a minute. In the end, I think I alluded to this earlier too. I was just like, I just make dumb stuff that I think is funny. So like, I don't. Yes, you can have really high intellectual humor. You can have low intellectual humor. You can have a structure of a joke that's really dumb but highly constructed and really intellectual. You can have really high level humor that's very simple. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. If you laugh, you laugh. That's kind of where I come from it. And I think whether you're telling big jokes or funny jokes or small jokes or nuanced jokes, they're still better than my 5-year-olds. And so I'm gonna take that. And so I'll take that if I can win that. But also, I think then you're also teaching mechanisms of humor, which I think, teaching somebody to swim, teaching somebody to fish, teaching somebody to ride a bike, like
Mm.
learning comedy, learning how to communicate through humor and express, shared humanity and sort of and addressing tension in rooms or tension in spaces or releasing all that, I think is a super important skill to teach your kids, and so like there are these like weird mechanisms of humor that it is a bit like a math problem where it can be what makes something funny, and there's variations on it, but ultimately like learning how that formula can work and then allowing kids to start dropping it in their own way, I think is super important and plays right into what you're talking about, which is sort of making humor a family value. Because kids then learn how to drop it in their own life, and not
Right.
just with their kids at school, but like, can they drop a joke in front of adults and make them laugh? Can they talk to their sister or brother, and can they sort of start to play with those other mechanisms of humor, and how does that affect their life? And I think it's a super valuable skill to teach them.
Do you have any ideas of how you can bring that in? I mean, I know families, or I've seen families where they clearly don't have, they're ostensibly they're happy, but we know that laughter is good for the nervous system. It
Mhm.
releases serotonin. This is just it is a very good thing for your overall health and your mental health.
For
But is
sure.
there ways that you can think of that you could bring that practice more into your family if you feel like it's lacking now?
That's interesting. It's so funny. I never really thought
Yeah, I
about
know
like
it's
the
not something.
causative way, but
It
yeah,
kind of
no,
comes
it's
organically. You don't think of it as like,
yeah.
how am I going to be more fun today?
Yeah, because again, like it can always feel forced. But I think again, like in our world, it's a little bit of just like, I mean, I used to get in trouble at school all the time because I was a class
Mhm.
clown, and
Right.
it was like smart, works hard, but very disruptive. Was kind of always my
Yeah, right, right.
like. So I've kind of naturally I'm always just trying to get a laugh out of people. And so that for me, I can't say that's the reason for it in the family, but certainly coming from my direction, it's just kind of that's sort of a little bit how I'm wired. But um, I think the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is we like watch comedy movies. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And classics. Like I love to kind of show my kid both with music and with films.
yeah,
Like I'll
yeah,
watch
yeah.
the stuff from like the I grew up on, 80s, 90s. And so kind of the classic stuff that feels a little cleaner to us, even though maybe it didn't at the time. And
Right.
but we'll also watch some of the modern stuff. We try to watch it in a little bit. So I think there is those sort of ingrained human things that drop in there that are sort of, there's difference of kids shows that use that, but then when you have a level of humor and that language and vocabulary of humor, you start to see that there. Obviously, just trying to get people to laugh, to play jokes on people. I've learned sometimes I get hot under the collar. I'm probably not the best at my temper, and I can kind of like step it up a little bit. And one thing I've noticed is that as I've kind of been more like able to kind of notice that in the moment and not deploy it instead of just go right from A to B. It's a little more of just like I'll make a joke. I'll say something that I was about to say. You know what I mean? In kind of like
Hmm.
a mock dad lecturing voice.
Right, right.
And then I'll like smile and make fun of myself
Yeah,
for like, this is probably what I shouldn't have said and what I wanted to say, but and then it kind of lightens the room and you can be like, can you please not do that? Can you just
yeah,
take a freaking bath? You know what I mean? Like instead of
yeah.
raising my voice, I kind of make fun of myself. Or we had this thing, my son is on a basketball team. And they do at the end, their game, it's 1, 2, 3, hard to guard, which is the name of his basketball team. And and so at the end, one day, I was like giving a long lecture, and I caught myself doing it, and I was like, "Man, I sound like my dad." Not that my dad gave him up, but it was just like, "Oh my God, these words are coming out of my mouth, and they're
Yeah,
channeling directly from my childhood." And I meant well, but at the end, I was like, "My kids are bored." I'm like, "Blah blah blah." And so at the end of my beautiful monologue, which I thought was brilliant, there was this pause, and everybody's bored, and nobody got it, and I was just like, "All right, put your hands in. 1, 2, 3, hard to guard." So that became this thing where we now like joke, and it's like anytime Dad's giving a lecture, anytime Dad has to stop and tell everybody anything, or anybody in the family now, you kind of make a joke about it, and it doesn't take away necessarily if you got to communicate that, but it does kind of take the lightness off of this, like, oh, there's heavy dad vibes now. He's angry about the TV again or the internet or whatever. You know what I mean? And like, and now we can kind of make fun of the fact that I had to say that, but the communication still gets across. And I think all those things kind of like, just because, again, back to your point earlier about like not making too much lightness that it takes away from the original point. I think that you can drop humor at times to lighten the tension and allow the listening to happen a little bit better and allow the lecture to land. Okay, guys, it's my job. I got to lecture you now. Here you go.
yeah,
Here's my
yeah,
words
yeah.
of wisdom. Yes, it's stupid, but
Right.
like it's my job. Okay, now let's make fun of me. Okay, great. Let's have dinner. And I think that where you can do that and teach people to use humor um, in really nuanced ways and do it in a way where you can use humor without making fun of what you're making fun of effectively,
Yeah.
then that's a really, really skillful thing to have.
Yeah, I like that because it is a hierarchical relationship, and you do have power over them, but you also want it to be an intimate relationship where they trust you and they care about you, not that you're just the person who lays down the law. And I love that self-deprecating kind of like I'm the
Yeah.
one who has to tell you you can't do this, and
Yeah.
you don't have to like it, but we
It's
can
my
have
job.
Yeah, right.
What one other thing that reminds me too is you're thinking of what are other things we can do. We pretty much always laugh at my kids' jokes. Like whether they're good or not, we kind of
Right.
always give them the win of. And now like
Yeah,
a couple, like they're getting pretty funny. A couple of them actually
right.
legitimately make me laugh. I mean, they all do in their own way. But when they intend to, like some of their jokes, but like when they're younger, sometimes like the jokes don't make sense, and they'll just like do a setup and then say like the funniest, the funniest thing to their head, which often is toilet humor initially. But like we kind of always laugh, or chuckle or give them acknowledgement. You know what I mean? You never make them wrong, or if it's like, okay, that's an inappropriate joke, you're like, that's funny, almost like that's well constructed, well done, but it's not something we talk about. You know what I mean? So I think also like acknowledging when they're attempting humor or making jokes or using humor and fun in the right ways, I think just elicits more of that and more practice and more ability in the long run. So I would say that too. Just like when your kids are trying to be funny, allow them to be funny. Give them an acknowledgement on that. It doesn't have to be a big fake guffaw, but just like, huh, I get it. Okay, good. Hey, that's
Yeah.
great. Nice job. And I think that I tend to find that in our life too, when we try to acknowledge the things that we want more of, and like maybe not award them or reward them, but like respond to them for sure.
Yeah.
And try
Yeah.
to do that more than we're like saying no to the things we don't want because we find it kind of steers them a bit in the way we
Yeah.
want.
Now, the one area I think that is kind of dangerous is sarcasm because
Oh,
they're not as attuned, and they can take, even something that's really that you mean as a total joke and is totally hyperbolic. The one problem I have with my humor is to me, it's super hyperbolic,
yep.
but they don't, a lot of people, even adults, don't get the fact that the situation that I'm describing is so ridiculous that it would never happen in the world.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why aren't you laughing? This is funny. And they're like, that really happened to you? Like,
Yeah.
no, no. But
No.
the worst thing for kids is to say something that you think is being sarcastic, and they take it personally, like they really
Right.
think they think you're saying they're a loser or they're
Yeah.
incompetent or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. Sarcasm is a tricky one. But yeah, you just I mean, I step in it every day one way or another. So it's like, oh, I screwed up there. Let me just go, oh man, did I say something? I'm so sorry. Hey, look, I didn't
Yeah.
mean that. And I always just try to own up as soon as I can, as soon as I notice
Well, I
something
think that's
bad.
really important, is to own up immediately if you realize
Yeah.
that you went a little bit too far, and they're not getting the humor
Yeah.
of what you're saying, is making sure they feel immediately reassured and that their reaction is valid,
For
their feeling
sure.
is valid. Yeah.
For sure.
I
Yeah.
I know in your conversation about the creative process, which that's your job. You're a director and a creative director. You talk
Mhm.
about the value of creative rituals. Do you think
Hmm.
that has any place in the family dynamic in terms of rituals that you could imagine?
For sure. I mean, and I think just to clarify too, like, and it can be different for other people, and it's been different at different times in my life too. Like, I think, it can be something really kind of like touchy-feely and what's the word? But like great, you know what I mean? You wanna burn some sage and dance around, in your underwear for a while, and if that gets you going and you kind of make that a ritual, great. It's not kind of what I'm doing, but it can be journaling, it can be just like a certain time of day or a certain way you write or a certain type of music or just whatever. I think for me, as long as you create those, it's kind of more about creating a habit. I
Hmm.
think I think with family, yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I've striven toward, but haven't been as successful at with our kids right now is like music because I'm a former musician and I don't play hardly as much as I used to since we're busy with everything else. But we have music around and we have instruments, and my oldest is actually pretty good drummer, and he plays in the school band and stuff like that. So one of the things in the next few months here, I'm trying to there's a room in the house that we're trying to sort of repurpose a little bit and repopulate into something that's a little bit more of just like a little play space for music where we can go and kind of jam and play. So to kind of create those spaces, sometimes it's physical space, sometimes it's otherwise. But yeah, I think anywhere, I think obviously I'm biased to creativity. I think creativity and it's not necessarily limited to like creative types of professions, but
Right.
I think
You're right. Right.
creativity is a natural human thing and it applies to everything. And some of the smartest, most capable people with hard skills that I know actually have some crazy like creative quote unquote a vocation that they've spent a lot of time doing, or it's a hobby, or they're just super fascinated at. And I think that that's really, or athletic or whatever. But I sort of feel like it all kind of comes into that heading. So we try to do that. We try to create these spaces. We don't have anything official that we do, but we definitely listen to a lot of music. And I take them to film school on a fairly regular basis too, and music school. But like to the point where I've always got some stuff on in the background. And now my kids, I had 80s on the other day, and my kids are humming to half the songs, and I'm like, yes. My son had his choice. We were in New York, and he had his choice for his birthday. This is maybe 2 years ago now, and he's a big, massive basketball fan and also music guy. And we were in a situation where because of a travel schedule and something else, we weren't going to be at home for his birthday. So I was like, well, what do you want to do that's special? Great, let's um, here's the Madison Square Garden, here's Barclays, here's Webster Hall, here's all these things in New York. Like, you want to go see a show? What do you want to do? You want to see a music show? You want to see a basketball game? Like, tell me what you want to do, and we'll try to figure out a way to make it happen. And he picked Depeche Mode because they were on tour. And I was like, man, I must be doing something right. You know what I mean? And he had a blast. He knew all the songs and he was super into it. So I just that was huge. So I think rituals can be really specific things, but I think it can also be like, what's the soundtrack of your life? You know what I mean? Like, some people don't love music, but I always have music on. And I think that's good because it enhances them to hear stuff. And when we watch a show or a movie, I like to try to be something that has a certain comedic artistic value. So I don't know. I think those things can become rituals too in our family and other families, and what you surround them with, whether it's opera or books or whatever. I think those things, even if it's not like the doingness of it, you're sort of feeding their creative vocabulary with input that then they can then sort of reinterpret it in their own way. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, I get that. If humor is a big thing for you, if you agree with us that it is a
Yeah,
value, try to bring more humor in like comedies rather than violent movies or
for sure.
yeah, that type of thing. I really also like there are a lot of family board games.
Yeah.
There are games that are more strategic and more intellectual, but then there are also games that they're designed to be very short and just bring out humor in a family. And
Yeah.
those can be really good, especially for the kids who aren't as necessarily attuned to it, or the spouse that isn't necessarily attuned to it. It's hard not to get everybody laughing when the content is just by
For
nature.
sure. It's tricky. I think it depends on the range of your family too. That's the big
Yeah,
challenge we
you've got
have
a big
sometimes is
range.
we've got from 2 to 13, which is kind of a spread. So
Yeah.
finding something that everybody can enjoy. We found a game called can I mention something on there? A
Sure.
game
Yeah.
called Blank Slate, which is it's
Another one.
basically it's so simple. It's like you hold out cards and it's like you have so it's like you know, um sugar blank. And then everybody has to write, when you write like Sugar Hill or Sugar
Yeah.
blah, and everybody can write it on their card. And then if you match with somebody, you get a point. It's super
Yeah.
simple, but it's something that the older kids can play, the younger kids can play, and it's usually pretty funny.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really easy, fun one. It helps them practice their writing and thinking, and there's sort of gamesmanship to it that's really fun. We play a lot of cards. And then yeah, we have these dumb games that were developed by my brother-in-law and his kids that we kind of play as a family too, which is just there's this one geography game which is so simple, but the kids love it all the way up to teenagers. And it's just like you say it can be any geographical place. So it can be like Harlem. And then the next one has to be starting with the last letter M.
Oh yeah.
And it can be,
Massachusetts.
Magnolia or yeah, Massachusetts or whatever. And it seems so simple, but I've seen these kids play this for hours. You know what I mean? I'll like jump in and be like, hey, I'm bored. I'm gonna go over here, and then I'll come back, and they might be playing basketball, still playing, but like
Yeah.
fun little weird sort of family games
Yeah.
like that can go on and on and on. I think
And it's
those are
usually the humor there is usually in the blooper is the thing that
oh
they
for sure, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's good. So we do things like that too. But yeah, games are great. Games are really great. I'd love to play them more, but that's the trick too is finding the what's a game that everybody can play. It's always tricky for
Yeah.
us, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, Gavin, I really enjoyed talking about this. It's always fun to talk about humor and laughs. And if anybody takes the time to go to your website, GavinBellour.com, it's worth a few laughs seeing some of those commercials in the way we used to watch. We used to as a culture
Yep.
know these commercials and
Oh
see
yeah,
them and be entertained by them. That's harder to all collectively have that experience anymore.
for
But
sure.
it's worth a few minutes of your time. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it, man. Great talking to you. Super fun.
Oh, okay. Paul Banson, GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com/go, including my free course for podcast listeners on gratitude. Maybe I should do one with you on humor.
We should. I'm into it.
Okay. Take care. Have a great day. Stay strong.
Thanks.